It was the late 90s, and the city of Los Angeles buzzed with the energy of opportunity and danger. For a group of childhood friends, Jake, Alex, Matt, and Chris, the world was a place where dreams could be made or destroyed in an instant. They had spent their younger years on the streets, doing everything from petty hustles to more serious crimes. But when they reached their late 20s, they realized that their ambitions stretched far beyond small-time jobs. They wanted more. Jake was the leader, charismatic, calculating, always thinking 5 steps ahead. Alex was his right-hand man, loyal to the core, but with a temper that sometimes got the best of him. Matt had always been the dreamer, constantly searching for ways to make it big, and Chris? Chris was the quiet one, the one who just observed, letting the others take the lead. But there was something deeper inside him, a desire for something more than the life they were building. Their breakthrough came when they crossed paths with a powerful businessman named Victor, a man who had ties to organized crime in the city. What started as a legitimate deal quickly turned into something more, and soon they were knee-deep in illegal ventures, laundering money, running schemes, and gaining influence in the underworld. But as their wealth and power grew, so did the cracks in their friendship. At the center of it all was not just business, but love, complicated and messy. Jake had been dating Olivia, a beautiful and intelligent woman from a wealthy family, for years. But Olivia had always been uncomfortable with Jake's criminal activities, even though she loved him. She couldn't quite reconcile her feelings for him with the life he led. The tension was building, and it wasn't long before Olivia found herself drawn to Alex, who was everything Jake wasn't: carefree, spontaneous, and thrilling. The attraction was immediate, and what started as a secret flirtation soon became something far more dangerous. The days after the confrontation with Olivia and Alex were filled with a kind of hollow numbness that Jake couldn't shake. The pain, the anger, it all felt so raw, but the sting of betrayal wasn't what haunted him the most. What he couldn't escape was the feeling of helplessness, the realization that no matter what he did, he had lost control of his own life. Olivia and Alex had made their choices, and now, there was nothing left but the wreckage. Or so he thought. Jake didn't want to wallow in the agony of it all. He had always prided himself on being a man of action, someone who solved problems rather than let them linger. So he began to think about what he could do to regain control, to do something that would give him back his power. He couldn't just let them walk away unscathed. He couldn't allow them to think that their betrayal would go unnoticed, that they could get away with it without consequences. But vengeance needed strategy. It needed precision. He had been thinking about it for days, carefully formulating the plan. He knew that Olivia and Alex were inseparable now, and if there was one thing Jake understood, it was how people like Alex operated. They liked their comforts. They thrived in the life they'd built together, the one Jake had given them: money, status, access to the best things in life. And Jake was going to use that against them. Alex was still his friend, or at least, he had been. The past was now irrelevant. Jake couldn't ignore the years they had spent together, the deals they had made, the trust they had shared. But what Alex and Olivia didn't know was that Jake had been watching them closely, even when they thought he was too distracted to notice. He knew their habits, their routines. He had 1,000 tiny details in his head, waiting for the right moment to strike. The plan was simple, but it required nerve. The first part was to get both of them into a room together, where they would be forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Jake decided to throw a party, a gathering with friends, business partners, and familiar faces. He'd already sent out invitations to people who didn't know about the drama unfolding between him and Olivia and Alex. It would be a celebration on the surface, but it would carry a much darker undertone. When Jake called Alex to invite him, he kept his voice steady, as if everything were normal, as if he didn't already know the truth. "Hey, Alex, I'm throwing a party on Saturday. You and Olivia should come. I've got a lot of people I want to introduce you to. It's going to be a good time," Jake said, the words rolling off his tongue easily. But the tension beneath the surface was undeniable. Alex seemed to hesitate for a moment. "Yeah, man. Sounds good. We'll be there." Jake hung up the phone, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to smile. He had just lured them into the trap. But that smile faded quickly. He knew this wouldn't be easy. There would be chaos. There would be anger. But he couldn't back down now. It was the only way he could regain control. He had to make sure they paid for what they'd done. Jake had always been good at pretending everything was fine, at hiding his emotions behind a carefully constructed facade. But the party preparations were starting to make him feel exposed. The tension in the air was suffocating, and he couldn't escape it. Every time he saw Olivia, he was reminded of the betrayal. Every time he saw Alex, he remembered the years they had spent together. Years that felt like they had been erased in a single, heart-shattering moment. The night of the party arrived, and Jake stood in front of the full-length mirror in his apartment, adjusting his tie. He tried to look calm, collected, but his reflection betrayed the storm brewing inside him. There was something bitterly ironic about it all. The fact that he had to pretend to be the host of a casual celebration while his entire world was crumbling around him. As people started arriving, Jake put on the mask of the charming host. He welcomed everyone with a smile, shook hands, and exchanged pleasantries, all while feeling the weight of the inevitable approaching. He was playing the role well, but deep down, he was counting the minutes until the moment of reckoning. Olivia and Alex arrived fashionably late, as expected. Jake had seen them from the corner of his eye, their laughter and conversation carrying through the crowded apartment before they even stepped inside. Olivia looked stunning as always, her hair perfectly styled, her eyes bright, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Alex was beside her, his usual confident demeanor a little more subdued, but still full of arrogance. The two of them moved together as if they were in their own world, completely unaware of the storm Jake had carefully set in motion. Jake greeted them at the door with a wide smile, masking the fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Hey, you two made it. Glad to see you here," he said, his voice smooth but with a certain edge. Olivia smiled back, her eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and discomfort. She had never been good at hiding her emotions, and tonight, they were all too visible. "Of course, Jake. We wouldn't miss it." Alex clapped Jake on the back, a bit too forcefully. "Good to see you, man." But Jake's mind wasn't on their pleasantries. His focus was entirely on what came next, the delicate, deliberate unraveling of the perfect life they had built. As the evening wore on, the tension between the three of them became undeniable. Olivia and Alex would exchange glances when they thought Jake wasn't looking. They would whisper in hushed tones, their quiet laughter cutting through the noise of the party. Jake was growing impatient, but he knew the time wasn't right yet. He had to wait for the perfect moment. It came when the alcohol began to flow freely, when people started letting their guard down. The music was louder now, and the guests were starting to let loose, the mood shifting from casual conversation to a more relaxed, celebratory atmosphere. Jake could feel it, the moment when everything would come to a head. He stepped up to the makeshift stage in the corner of the room, taking a microphone in hand. He raised it, cutting through the chatter with a steady, authoritative voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention," Jake said, his tone commanding. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It means a lot to have you all here, especially with everything going on. But there's something I need to address. Something important." The room grew silent as everyone turned to look at him. Olivia and Alex froze, their eyes meeting each other in shared panic. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to care. "Not anymore. I've spent a lot of time thinking, a lot of time wondering why certain people in my life did what they did," Jake continued, his voice unwavering. "And I've realized that it's not enough to just sit back and let them get away with it. So tonight, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they are." Olivia's face turned pale, her hand instinctively reaching out to Alex. But Alex stepped back, his face hardening. "Jake, don't," Olivia whispered, her voice desperate, but it was too late. Jake had already made his decision. "I'm talking about you, Olivia." "And you, Alex," Jake said, his eyes narrowing as he locked eyes with both of them. The room went still. It was as if the entire apartment held its breath. "You thought you could do this behind my back. You thought you could tear apart everything I've worked for without any consequences. But I'm not going to let that happen. Not anymore." Olivia's face twisted with a mixture of shame and anger. Alex, on the other hand, stood still, as if he didn't know what to say. The tension that had been building all evening snapped, and the room erupted into whispers and murmurs. Jake could feel the heat of everyone's gaze, but he didn't care. He had already won. The truth was out now, and as the crowd buzzed with shock, Jake turned and walked away, leaving Olivia and Alex standing there, exposed, as the world around them crumbled. In this extended version, you can see Jake's deepening resolve and how the tension builds as he sets his plan into motion. The emotional depth of the situation increases, and the situation between Olivia, Alex, and Jake intensifies as the night continues. The following days felt like a constant, simmering tension for Jake. He was too proud to show it, too angry to express it. Instead, he buried himself in work, organizing deals, overseeing operations, pretending that everything was fine. But deep inside, he knew something had broken, something important. It started small, but the cracks began to show. Olivia was distant, her presence less comforting and more suffocating. She was pulling away from him, physically and emotionally. She still came to their shared apartment, still cooked meals, but there was a palpable coldness between them. Her eyes no longer lit up when she saw him. Instead, they carried a sadness that Jake could feel but never fully understand. Alex had become increasingly aloof too. He would show up at meetings but not speak much, always finding reasons to leave early or avoid eye contact. Jake knew something wasn't right. He just didn't know what. He felt betrayed, but he wasn't ready to face the truth. It was easier to pretend that everything was fine. But on that fateful night, when Jake came home early to surprise Olivia, he finally realized the depth of the betrayal. He walked into the living room, expecting to see her curled up on the couch with a book, but instead, he found Alex sitting there. The room felt colder than usual, the silence thicker. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jake's voice broke the stillness, his words sharp and accusing. Alex stood up, trying to cover the discomfort in his eyes. Olivia, sitting next to him, stood up quickly, too. But the damage was already done. Jake's gaze shifted from Alex to Olivia, the reality sinking in with every passing second. She didn't even look guilty, not in the way he expected. Instead, there was a resignation in her eyes, as if she had known this moment was inevitable, as if she had already made peace with the choices she had made. "Jake," Olivia started, but her voice faltered. She wanted to speak, to explain, but there was no easy way out of this. "No," Jake said, his voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and hurt. "No more lies. Just tell me the truth. Have you been seeing him behind my back?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, but then, as if some invisible barrier broke, she nodded. "Yes, Jake. It's been happening for months now. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep living this lie." Jake's stomach twisted as the words hit him like a punch to the gut. Months. They had been betraying him for months. The weight of it nearly crushed him. He had built his entire life on trust and loyalty, and now, both had been ripped from him. Alex, sensing the rising tension, tried to step forward, but Jake held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't. I don't want to hear your excuses." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but Jake cut him off. "You were my friend. I trusted you, and you betrayed me. Both of you." Olivia's face crumpled with regret, but she didn't try to deny it. Instead, she just whispered, "I'm sorry, Jake. I never wanted to hurt you. I just couldn't stop myself." The betrayal was suffocating. The love Jake had for Olivia, the respect he had for Alex, it all felt hollow now. The realization that they had been hiding this from him, laughing behind his back, tore through him like a blade. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to steady his shaking hands. He could feel the rage building inside him, but he refused to let it explode. Instead, he stood there, silently, letting the silence stretch between them. "I need time to think," Jake said finally, his voice cold and detached. Without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving Olivia and Alex in the apartment that had once been a symbol of everything he had worked for. The door slammed shut behind him, and in that instant, everything in his life felt like it had been turned upside down. Over the next few days, Jake kept to himself. He spent hours driving around the city, unable to settle anywhere for too long. His mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of retribution. But somewhere, deep down, there was also an undeniable ache. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt him. It was the loss of trust, the loss of something that had once felt unbreakable. He couldn't get rid of the image of Olivia and Alex together. The way they had looked at each other, the chemistry they shared. It burned in his mind, haunting him. He was no longer sure who was at fault, Olivia, for betraying him, or Alex, for being the one to take advantage of the situation. Despite the searing pain, Jake knew he had to act. He wasn't going to let this slide. But how? How could he confront both of them, knowing that their relationship, whatever it had been, was now broken beyond repair? His decision came when he realized something that made his blood run cold. Olivia wasn't just leaving him emotionally. She was planning to leave him for Alex. She had told him as much in one of their last conversations, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not in love with you anymore, Jake," she had said. "I'm sorry, but I'm in love with him. And I can't keep pretending." Jake had already felt the sting of her words, but hearing them confirmed his worst fears. He had never been able to truly understand the depth of Olivia's unhappiness. He had thought that the business, their success, and their life together were enough. But in the end, it had never been about money or power. It had been about something much more fragile: trust, loyalty, love. And so, Jake devised a plan. He knew that the only way to reclaim control was to make them feel the same way he did, betrayed and powerless. He would confront them, not privately, but in front of everyone. He would expose their relationship for what it was. And in doing so, he would show them the consequences of their actions. The night of the party arrived. It was supposed to be just another gathering with friends and associates, businessmen, small-time crooks, and former childhood acquaintances. But for Jake, this party was the stage for a different kind of performance. He had invited Olivia and Alex, knowing they would come. But what they didn't know was that he had already orchestrated the night down to the smallest detail. He had set the trap. The apartment was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and music. People milled about, unaware of the tension in the air. Olivia and Alex arrived together, looking as if everything were fine. Jake watched from the corner of the room, nursing a drink, his eyes never leaving them. At first, it felt almost normal. Olivia and Alex laughed and joked with everyone else, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. But Jake could see through the facade. He could see the cracks in their act. They were nervous, constantly avoiding eye contact with him, but still pretending that nothing had changed. It wasn't until later in the evening, after a few drinks had loosened everyone's tongues, that Jake decided to pull the trigger. Standing up from his seat, he raised his glass and called for attention. "Hey, everyone," Jake's voice cut through the chatter. "I'd like to say something." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Olivia and Alex froze. They knew exactly what was coming. "I've been keeping something from all of you," Jake continued, his voice calm but edged with coldness. "You see, it's funny how people think they can get away with things when no one's watching. But I've always been paying attention. I've always known what's been happening behind my back." There was a collective gasp as the room waited for him to continue. Olivia's face turned pale, and Alex's expression hardened. "Alex," Jake said, staring directly at his old friend, "I never thought you would betray me. But here we are." The room erupted in whispers. Alex's face flushed, but he didn't speak. Olivia tried to move towards Jake, but he held up a hand, stopping her. "And Olivia," Jake's gaze softened, "but only for a moment. You were the one person I thought I could trust. The one person I thought would never hurt me. But I was wrong." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but there was no apology in her look, just guilt and regret. "Let's not pretend anymore," Jake said, his voice growing louder. "You two were sleeping together behind my back. I know everything." The room went silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Alex's face twisted with anger, but before he could say anything, Olivia's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "This wasn't just about you, Jake." Olivia shouted, her voice breaking. "You were never there. You were too busy with your empire, your business. I needed someone who was present, who cared." Alex cared." A shocked silence followed her outburst. Jake's heart twisted, but it wasn't for Olivia. It was for the friendship that had been shattered. He had never seen it coming, but now that it was out in the open, Jake had always been the mastermind, the one who stayed ahead of everyone else. But what he didn't expect was the final betrayal. It wasn't Alex or Olivia who truly hurt him. It was Matt. Matt, the dreamer, had been playing both sides. He had been working with Victor all along, secretly orchestrating the fall of the entire operation. He had convinced Jake that they had a chance to make things right, all the while setting him up for a fall. The moment of truth came during a confrontation at their old hangout. Jake, Alex, and Matt faced each other. Matt's cold smile said it all. He had been working with Victor the entire time. "You were never the leader, Jake," Matt said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I was always the one calling the shots. You were just too blind to see it." And with that, Matt walked away, leaving Jake to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. Months later, Jake stood on the rooftop of a building overlooking the city. His life, once filled with power, betrayal, and love, had crumbled to dust. The people he had trusted had all turned on him. But in the distance, he saw something new. A chance, a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, he smiled. The twist? He wasn't done yet. Jake had been planning his revenge all along. Matt, Victor, Olivia, they wouldn't get away with it. Jake wasn't just a leader, he was a survivor.